I am Kurt Levy. I was born in Germany, in Wiesbaden, a beautiful town, in the year of 1910. My family has lived in Germany for many generations. I cannot trace it back to really, technically speaking, how many, but in the early 18th century, up to the 18th century, the Jews in Germany were not allowed to live in big cities. So my forefathers lived in small villages surrounding Wiesbaden. And then, after the borders opened, they moved into the city. The years from 1909, when my parents got married, were very prosperous years. My dad, may he rest in peace, used to say, whoever will not make a success at this time and age in Germany is either a fool or lazy. Well, my dad was neither one. He quit school at the age of 14. He lost his father early, and he took over the business to support his mother and his 3 sisters. And he did a good job. He was an extrovert, a man who was liked by everybody, and who was successful in his business, cattle business, dairy cows, Holstein cows. And he lived in those years in a city about 35 miles away from Wiesbaden, Limburg an der Lahn, also a historic city with a beautiful dome. And the house of my forefathers was right at the bottom of the dome. Strangely enough, there was also a church right next to the cow stable of my fathers, which is an indication that the Jew in Germany was well integrated, was well accepted. The Jew remained a Jew, but as far as we were concerned, we were observant Jews, Orthodox, but to us, Judaism was just a religion. We were Germans, Germans, Germans all the way through, and nothing could interfere with that. Things changed after the unfortunate First World War. The once flourishing country became poor. They had reparations to pay to the Allies. They did not have enough money. So many of the Allies, especially the French, instead of getting money, took the machinery out of the industrial part of Germany and deprived Germany of the ability to produce. This lack of production, in turn, caused poverty, unemployment and poverty. It came from bad to worse. In 1923, which was my bar mitzvah year, the railroads went on strike. There was no communication. My parents had a big party planned, but our relatives who would have to come by train could not come. So it fell flat. And in the years to come, very shortly, things in Germany became very bad. Anti-Semitism at that point was not pronounced. There was always a certain kind of anti-Semitism, but more or less under the skin. It did not come out. My school years were very pleasant. Our school was only a couple of blocks away from our home. I could come home for lunch and go back to school. And we had a very relative relatively small Jewish population. In my school of about 250 boys, the girls had a separate school, Lyceum. So there were about, in all the classes, maybe 5 or 6 Jewish boys. And what made it kind of unpleasant in a way was there was the 2 hours every week of religion. And the Protestant boys and the Catholic boys went into different classes and had their religious lessons. And we Jewish boys were sitting by ourselves in a separate room. Well, when that lesson was over and we went back in our regular class, there was always a certain feeling of strangeness. Our family life was very important, and our religion was very important to us. When I first decided to go to law school, I became a lawyer, my dad was very much against it. He says, you stay home in our business, and you lead a family life as beautiful as our life is, which cannot compare to the high-class Jews who live in the big city and are not Jews anymore in a religious way, are completely assimilated, and don't have the beautiful family life that we have. Well, like all boys, I didn't listen to my father and became a lawyer anyhow. Money constantly lost its value. But this is an indication how bad the economy was, how people could not plan anything, and how things went to the dogs. No government could succeed. One Reichskanzler after the other failed and was replaced. Hindenburg, who was a great military leader in the First World War and who was well known and well respected, became Vice President. In his desperation, he appointed Adolf Hitler to lead the nation. Well, that was the beginning of the end. The Jews, again, being the good Germans, didn't believe he would last like no other Reichskanzler had lasted before. My dad used to say, give that jerk 60 days and he'll be gone. But he didn't go. In those days, I was practicing law in my hometown, am Landesgericht. I was pleading a case one morning, and all of a sudden, we heard goose steps, hard heels on the stone floor of the courthouse. The judge, who was a wise man, knew what was happening. He knew the Nazis were coming. He pulled me by the arm behind the bar and pushed me into his chamber. At that moment, the stormtroopers came in, Juden raus, out with the Jews. I disappeared through a back door, and a few weeks later, the lawyers, all Jewish lawyers and degrees, were annihilated. So that was the end of the career that I had planned and worshipped all my young years. But there were just a few of us who were affected. Business was good. My dad's business was flourishing. He couldn't see what was happening. He just didn't want to see it. Being an only child, when I talked about leaving the country, my mother would cry. So it became impossible to say goodbye. Nobody molested us. We were very respected in the city. Everything was fine. So I struck a compromise. I went to Basel, Switzerland for my doctorate. After Basel, those years you could go back and forth in and out of Germany. You could even take a few Reichsmark out to carry you for a few weeks. I had the idea, being a religious Jew, to go to Palestine. Agriculture was an important item in what's today Israel, what was then Palestine. And I knew a lot about it, having lived with it in my young years. And you were able to export machinery from Germany to Palestine. So I lined up milking instruments, the whole machinery that you need to run a dairy farm. And just as I was getting ready to materialize it, they clamped the law down, the Nazis, that nothing can be exported anymore. All anybody could take out of Germany was his personal belongings. Well, I guess I was not enough of an idealist to start as a farm worker or as anything else in a hard-working, difficult country which Palestine was in those days. So Palestine fell by the wayside too. My closest friend of my school years, Alfred Halberstadt, emigrated early, maybe in 1932, to Johannesburg, South Africa. And he kept on writing me how nice it is, why don't you come? So that was another project. And just as I was getting ready for it, the newspaper reported anti-Semitic outbursts in Johannesburg. So I said, what I do, go from the fire in the frying pan, and that eliminated Johannesburg. Why didn't I go to the United States? Because I couldn't. It was my first choice right along. My parents were against it, all the water, but I would have overcome that. But you need an affidavit to get into the United States. I had no close relatives in this country. Had one distant relative, second or third cousin of my dad's, to whom I wrote, and who turned me down because his brother and sister were still in Germany, and he felt that he has to bring them out, and he did not want to weaken his affidavit for his brother and sister. So, what to do? How do you get to the United States? I made myself a partner in my dad's business. Changed the records, changed everything. And after a few months of running it that way, I went to the German consul in Frankfurt, which was not an immigration council. The immigration council was Stuttgart, but there was also a consul in Frankfurt. And I told him, I want to go to the United States on my way to Santo Domingo and Haiti, where I want to visit some friends. And I want to stop over for 10 days in New York to visit a friend there. And on that basis, showing my books as a partner of a business and definitely returning to Germany, he gave me a visa for 10 days, a transit visa. But before he did, he made me sign a declaration that I would not remain in the United States illegally, nor immigrate through another country. In my desperation, I would sign anything, and I did. Got to New York. The man who turned me down by letter gave me the affidavit. I went to the Council of Jewish Women for directions, and the worker said, that's fine, you go to Havana and see the consul in Havana, and he stays there for 2 days, and then you come back an immigrant to the United States. I said, what? I signed a paper, said I would not immigrate through another country. Forget about it, she said. How will the consul in Havana know what you signed in Frankfurt? Forget it. But I didn't like it. I went back to her. She almost threw me out of the office. She said, if you want to go back to Hitler and get killed, be my guest. Okay. I found out her days off was, pardon me, Wednesday, let's say. I went back to that office and talked to her supervisor. And she said, told her the story and my feeling. And she said, my colleague is right. Go ahead, you have no problem. Well, I had 2 good opinions and went to Havana. Had my physical. Next day, I saw the vice consul for my papers. And he said, what made you come to Havana to emigrate to the United States? I told him I was on a pleasure trip to Haiti and Santo Domingo. And my friends in New York, that's what the women at the office had told me to say, convinced me that there's no time for a German Jew to go on pleasure trips, stay in the United States. So I changed my mind about the pleasure trip, and here I am to emigrate to the United States. He says, well, I got to verify that. I'm going to write for your papers to the consul in Germany. How long will that take? Oh, about 3 months, because all consular papers will go from one consul through Washington to another consul. I said, can't you speed it up? He said, what's your hurry? You wanted to go to San Domingo and Haiti anyhow. He says, but now I'm in a hurry. Well, I convinced him to wire Germany, but still the papers had to come through Washington. The papers came, and he called me in. He pulled out this paper, not to immigrate through another country. Did you sign this, Mr. Levy? Yes, I did. He sat back in his chair. I have to turn down your application. That was the end of the road. He got up, showed me to the door. I didn't. I sat. I kept on talking. And my English wasn't all that good. Well, he didn't understand me. And he couldn't physically throw me out, I guess. So he said, I'll let you talk to the consul. He just came back from a 6-year stint in Hamburg, Germany, and he speaks German. Nice man. And he said, you're lying to me. Your papers show that you had an immigration visa to Haiti. And you're telling me you wanted to go on a pleasure trip. I said, that's wrong. Never did I have any intention to go to Haiti. That's what it says. I said, let me prove to you that I didn't. I don't know what difference it would make, he says, but be my guest. So I went to the Western Union office and cabled my dad to get me a verification from the consul in Haiti, said I never had an immigration visa. I made that cable very short because every word cost money. And my dad, may he rest in peace, read my cable the wrong way. He thought I wanted a certification that I had a visa to immigrate to Haiti. I went to the consul. The consul said, I don't know any Kurt Levy. My dad says, he was here. You gave it to him. He called his secretary do you know of any Kurt Levy? Never heard of him. Well, my dad was a good salesman. And he said, what are you doing to me? My son's life is at stake in Havana. You've got to help me out. So, as a guy being a businessman, just a consul on the side, wrote a letter. And that letter had to go through the consul in Havana. Yeah. At which point, he called me in when he got it. He was the biggest liar I've ever seen. The contrary of what you're telling me is true. Well, I told him of the predicament. And he talked to me for about an hour to verify, to believe what I was saying. Whether he believed it or not, I don't know. But his heart came through. He says, you got your papers? Heaven to hell. And he gave me my immigration visa. So it was 3 terrible months in Havana. Luckily I made a little money and could eat and live, but it was rough. Then I took the boat back, and the immigration officer on the boat looked at my papers, Ellis Island, because the message of a turn down of an immigration from any consul in the world goes, it's Interco office, I don't know which, and he saw my name as a turn down in his records. So he sent me to Ellis Island. Well, it took a few days for me to get the proper information to the immigration authorities from Havana, and then I entered New York, a free man.
Can you tell us what the date was when you immigrated into the United States? I
immigrated to the United States in March of 1937. My parents came to visit me in fall of 1937. And they left the United States. They didn't like what their lawyer son was doing, because I was fortunate enough to get myself a job as a stock boy, making good money, $13.50, which was a week, which was good money in those days. But stock boy was saying too much. I swept floors, I set mouse traps, I packed merchandise and all that stuff. And my dad couldn't understand that his only son, the former lawyer, would take a job like that and be as happy as I was. But most of all, he said, I'm not going to speak the language anymore, learn the language anymore. He had just a school education. He quit school at the age of 14. And I'm not going to leave my fortunes to Hitler. I'm not going to come to the United States. And crying like a baby when I took him to the train, they left and went back to Germany. Well, in November of '38, things changed his mind.
Tell us about that.
The Nazis came in Kristallnacht, took him to concentration camp, destroyed our home completely, took the pictures, oil pictures from the wall, cut them to pieces, picked the carpets up from the floor, cut them to pieces. My mother had the most beautiful cabinet with crystals. They put it on the floor and stamped on it with their boots. Took my dad away.
Where?
And my mother was left in the ruins. Strangely enough, my dad also said when he went back, nobody's going to touch me. In a way, he was right. He was a smart guy. None of the Nazis, stormtroopers, in our town would come to take Joseph Levy to concentration camp. They had to bring people in from Frankfurt to take him. But
where did they take him?
Theresienstadt. So my mother was sitting in the ruins, and then she moved in with her brother's sister, her sister-in-law, and the two of them lived together for 30 days. That her husband and my dad were in concentration camp. In those days we still had influence, and through pulling different strings, I was able to get them both out of concentration camp with a promise that they would turn everything they had over to the Nazis and leave the country within 30 days. Well, that they did, but their quota to come to the United States was not up. I had to get them out of Germany. I was fortunate enough to get them to England. England required a $20,000 bond as guarantee that they would not become a public burden. I was fortunate to borrow that money and got them out in 1938 to England. They stayed in England through the Blitz, and in 1941 their quota came up and they came to the United States.